Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Merrimack Planning Board for Tuesday, October 4th. Let's begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, have the sing. That's it.
I know, it just comes.
Okay. Other procedural matters. Nelson and Maureen are both alternates. We'll put you in for voting positions for Paul and Jamie. Right?
Works.
Yep.
Let's see. Let's remind everybody that's going to address the board to make sure the microphone's turned on. You speak clearly into it, and you also identify yourself and what your connection to the case is, if any. The next planning board meeting after tonight's currently scheduled for Tuesday, October 18th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. in the Matthew Thornton room, which is this room. That concludes sort of the call to order business that we would attend to. Tim, is there a planning and zoning administrator's report?
Just a brief update, as I had mentioned before we started. The application period for the assistant planner position closed on Friday. I have 5 applications that were received. I will be reviewing them, and there may be a need to go back out and repost depending on the review of qualifications and whatnot. We probably will interview at least one of the 5, possibly 2, but a little disappointed in the qualifications and educational background of some of the applicants we've seen so far.
Thank you, Tim. Other questions by members of the board for the staff? Seeing none, then let's move ahead on our agenda to item 3, which is our consent agenda. There are 2 items listed on the consent agenda, although the second one's got many parts. What's the will of the board with respect to the consent agenda?
I move we accept the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Nelson?
I have a question. Are we including in that the waiver of notification to adjacent towns with regard to the Howe warehouse case?
Yes,
That's in
the recommendation from staff is that it does not meet the requirements of
right.
regional
And I
notification.
just wanted to ask staff a question about that. Did there's a traffic study that was done with this, and did it indicate any?
It qualified for a minor analysis because the trip levels were that low.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. That wasn't clear from the information I had. Okay, I'm ready to vote, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nelson. We're going to get better at practice with consent agenda items in the future. I think technically the question we just had would have pulled something off of the consent agenda, but since it was an easy enough question to answer, I think we'll kind of proceed forward and keep on the expedited process. If there's no other discussion on the consent agenda, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Let's see, there's 6 of us tonight, so 6-0-0 to approve the consent agenda. Item 4 on our agenda is Bowers Landing of Merrimack 2 LLC as the applicant and owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval for a 2-lot subdivision. The parcel is located off Bowers Landing Drive in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts. It's tax map 1D, lot 1-4. It's case planning board 2022-31. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In your packet, you'll find a memo dated September 29th from Planning and Zoning Administrator Robert Price. This project, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is the Bowers Landing project off of Route 3 in the southern part of town. Harris Pond Development is what it's formerly known as. There are several phases to this, the most recent being the 3 24-unit apartment buildings that were situated on the same lot as the current construction that's going on for Townsend Place. The applicant, for purposes of financing and management of the property, was able to obtain a variance from the zoning board last week to allow for the subdivision of this lot on a road without frontage on a Class 5 road, because Bowers Landing Drive is a private roadway not maintained by the town, And the lot where the apartments would eventually be, if should this subdivision be granted, would not have frontage on a Class 5 public roadway. That variance was granted. There is no change or no new development taking place here. It's simply drawing the lot line so that the financing and management of these properties can move forward as the applicant is hoping to do so. This is a minor subdivision, so the board can determine that many items are not necessary under section 407. So any of the waivers that were requested could be handled that way. I know there was a waiver from the topographic plan, which is really not necessary should you make the finding under that section of the regs.
Thank you, Tim. Matt, go ahead and introduce yourself. And
Good evening. Matt Peterson with Keach Nordstrom Associates. Here with me tonight is Andy Proman, counsel for the applicant. I think Tim kind of went through everything that's there. If there's really any questions that the board has, up in front of you is the approved site plan from the Bowers Landing project. And you'll see this line that says limit of work. And it kind of went right around along in here and then up to the corner. That is basically, we just made that a lot line instead of convertible condo land at the time when we originally got this approved through the site plan application. As Tim said, it's really becoming a thing with the homeowners association and having 65 single family homes that are in the same association with 72 garden style apartments. I guess there's a lot of difference between the type of insurance you get on your individual home and the insurance they get on a whole building, landscaping, just a lot of things that it's made it kind of difficult to piece the two together. So as Tim said, we went and got the variance last week. Just so this board understands, a no frontage lot is allowed in this district. It's in the industrial district. It's just that we put residential units on it was why we needed the variance for it. So obviously it fits in the area we think and makes sense, but I'll take any questions or comments the board has.
One clarification, like I did with the zoning board last week, the Townsend Place and Toby Circle, they're individual units, but they are considered multifamily under the ordinance because they're all in the same lot and they're condominiums.
thank you for that, Tim. Board members, do you have any questions of the applicant? The first question that we're going to have to tackle as a board is completeness. And so specific questions targeting that question of completeness, if you have any. If not, what's the will of the board? Nelson?
I didn't understand what you're asking us to do.
Our
sorry.
first question as a board, our first task is to decide whether the application's complete. So if you have
Okay.
questions relative to that, let's ask them, and if not, then let's have the board consider a motion.
I will make a motion to accept this for consideration.
Is there a second to Nelson's motion? Second by Lynn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0. Okay. There are some waivers that the staff has that the applicant has requested. Staff has indicated that we can treat these either as waivers that we would vote on as we normally would do, or as a part of a minor subdivision. Consider all of these things to be not necessary for our review. And
that can be by consensus, not needing a vote.
yeah, that would be as consensus ultimately wrapped up in the final vote. I think that we've tended to treat these as not necessary when they've come up, but look at the list of things that are being considered and decide whether any of them actually are necessary.
And can I just add to the board that everything that's requesting there is actually recorded at the town and in Mylars for the site plan that we just did. So
Okay.
I agree, not necessary.
Topographic plan,
Right.
and that's it, just that. That's not so big.
Not
Yeah, I
big
thought there
deal.
was more, I'm sorry. Okay. Consensus of the board that a topo plan's not needed?
Yep.
Okay. General questions of the applicant about the project? Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in?
I have some general questions, but
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We don't have any public testimony anyway, so we'll close the public hearing and come back to your question.
okay. Question I had, there's a little lot that's kind of on the other side, I guess it'd be the west or the north side of Bowers Landing Drive. And that little parcel of land, sort of triangular spaced, what becomes of that? Is that it's part of the multifamily condo that's already developed?
So this is what's existing today on your tax map. So lot number 1 is what we had done for the townhomes and then the single family condo multifamily. Number 2 is what we're looking at right now.
Uh-huh.
And then number 3 exists up front. So all we're looking to do is make a number 4
Right.
between 2 and 3. So what triangle are you?
I was looking at in lot number 2.
If you're looking at the tax map, it's because our GIS can't differentiate between, because it's a private roadway, it's part of the lot. It's not actually a right of way through it. It's part of the lot.
Okay, I just wanted to know its intended use in the,
You're gonna develop it.
No change.
what?
There's no change. It's already part of the development.
Okay, what, how is it developed? It's just shown blank here.
There's nothing there.
I'm confused with what, looking up there,
I'm
which,
not even sure what part of the
I'm not-
lot we're talking about. Somebody
Me-
point to what piece of land that we're dealing with, or we're
Okay.
asking questions about.
Okay, if you look at Bowers Landing
yep,
Road as it goes through, on the
Yep.
left-hand side, when you come in off of Manchester Street,
yep.
on the left-hand side,
Okay,
there's a piece of land
Yep.
that's left there.
gotcha. That's just,
Open space.
that's extra land that we used for the 65 that we just got approved there. So this phase here is the last number of units that we're allowed.
Okay.
Yeah, so
And
common land,
So
basically.
it is common land
As part of the condominium condo.
and it will go with this new lot,
No,
It'll stay with the original.
or the
two.
original lot, if you call it that, and the new lot will not have an ownership in that. Is that,
Correct.
Gotcha.
okay, that's what I wanted.
Thank you, Nelson. I just wasn't sure what piece of land we're talking about.
I know it's, well, it's, okay, thank you. I'm sorry for the
No problem.
confusion. Yeah, the residual piece, yeah. And, that's all I have right now. Thank
Okay.
you.
No other questions? Does any other board member have questions about what's proposed here? Is the board willing to make a motion?
Did you ask for a butters?
Already did.
Yeah, we did that.
None answered, okay.
No.
Lot 141.
Is anybody willing to make a motion?
I don't know, I need to get my words.
Can I suggest, even though we're going to talk about it later, that in your motion, you make a part of your motion that you state that the board finds that the applicant has met all required elements of the subdivision regulations in order to grant
Of course.
approval. Thank you.
I move that we approve the acceptance and final approval for a 2-lot subdivision. Parcel is located off Bowers Landing Drive in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation District, tax map 1D Lot 001-04, case number PB 2022-31, subject to and the findings that they have met the criteria. Does that work?
Got it right?
Requirements. They've met the requirements of the subdivision.
Okay. Is there a second for Lynn's
I'll
motion?
second that. Yeah.
Second by Mr. Disco. If there's no further discussion. all
One
in-
further question,
please.
please.
Yes,
The new lot, the lot 141 is being created. It doesn't, it shows one building on there. There's 4 buildings going on there.
So there's actually 3 that are going on there. What is shown on there is the foundation that was in the ground already. So we had picked up the survey, so that shows the foundation that's going
Yeah.
in, that's already in. And that's what I put on.
The intent is to build
The
3
intent is to build these 3 right here,
3 multifamily. Okay,
approved by the planning board.
thank you.
okay. Other discussion?
Nope.
Then all in favor of granting conditional final approval as described in the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Have a good night.
And thank you, members of the board. Okay.
Hard to done
Um,
here.
Item 5 on our agenda is Stewart's Ambulance Service as the applicant and WB Properties LLC as the owner. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a waiver of full site plan review to construct an accessory residential dormitory space within the existing building. The parcel is located at 26 Columbia Circle, Unit D, in the I-1 Industrial, Aquifer Conservation, and Elderly Housing Overlay Districts, Tax map 4D3, lot 24. It's case planning board 2022-32. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This project comes to us via an inspection that was done by the fire department, where it was discovered that the current user of the site, Stewart's Ambulance, has a space for sleeping quarters for people that are working for the ambulance service. This has been a long established non-conforming use in the property. However, there was not a residential component to that ever noted or documented in any of the permitting records. So the applicant went to the zoning board of adjustment, obtained a special exception to allow the accessory dormitory use. And because it is a mixed-use property now, that accessory dormitory use requires planning board approval. There are no proposed site changes, but the applicant will be working with the fire and building department to ensure that new space, that space is going to be brought up to all applicable codes as is required by the building and fire codes.
Please introduce yourself and tell us about the project.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Don Welford. I'm the Senior Vice President of Stewart's Ambulance. And as described, we unknowingly were occupying space with sleeping quarters that was not permitted. When it was brought to our attention by the fire department, we immediately rectified the situation and stopped it. We've worked consistently with the fire department in all our planning as we've gone through this process. There will be no changes to the building at all. This is an interior project, not an exterior project. And what we're doing is we'll be installing firewalls that will meet all fire and safety codes as well as building codes. The components that will be built will be sprinkled as well as all required fire alarms of carbon monoxide, fire, horn, strobes, and all of that will be within code. So today we're here asking for final approval from you for this project so that we can begin the process of making the dormitory space within the confines of the current building.
Thank you for that. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant? Nelson?
Just one question. I noticed from the aerial photograph that there's a considerable encroachment from this property onto the adjacent property that has a cell tower on it. And is anything being done to address that?
That is not something that we are currently enforcing or going after because we have not received any request to do so. We do not go out of our way to make enforcement calls. We only act on those that are submitted for request. Because I don't have staff to do so otherwise.
Just for the record, there's a considerable encroachment there.
Yeah, looks like there is.
But it's been there for a long time.
Could be.
That's true. I think that we would normally make some comment in our approval of a project like this to say we're not blessing the encroachment and let it go with that. Tim, ahead of the meeting, we talked about some mention of the establishment of these dormitory spaces as being ancillary to the ambulance business and not ordinary residential apartment dwelling
Correct.
units. Did you
If the board feels that it's necessary to do so, you could require that there be a general condition added to this project that states that the dormitory use of this site is not construed to be a separate individual rental or residential unit for other use.
Yeah. And I have no doubt that this applicant has no interest in pursuing any residential or rental property, but if they ever leave this space and it becomes available on the market, you know the next guy's going to claim it's an apartment building with three dozen units or however many there are in there. And that's why I was after that kind of a clarification, just to think ahead.
Yeah.
It's totally up to the board. I feel confident that the record based on this approval and the zoning board's approval makes clear what the intent is, and that any attempt to do so otherwise would be immediately brought to enforcement action.
Thank you for that, Tim. Okay, board members, the first task before us is completeness. What is the will of the board?
I would
Nelson?
move that we consider this application complete.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second to determine the application complete. If there's no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600. The applicants requested a waiver of full site plan review based on there being no external changes to the building footprint. What's the will of the board with respect to said waivers?
I will so move.
Which statutory criteria supports the waiver?
That would be,
Top of the page there.
yep,
Unnecessary,
it would be unnecessary hardship.
Okay. Is there a second for Lynn's motion to grant a waiver of full site plan review based on unnecessary hardship?
Second.
There's a second discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That's 600. Are there any abutters or interested citizens who wish to weigh in on this proposal? I don't see any, and so we'll gavel open and close the public hearing. I would like there to be some general condition that talks about this not being a use that
General use.
a general residential use outside of being ancillary to the ambulance business.
I'll attach that condition to my motion.
All right, so make your motion.
I move that we approve the waiver for full site plan review.
That part we did.
Yeah, we've already granted the waiver of full
Okay.
site plans. Now it's conditional approval of the project
On the
itself.
back, where it says recommendation, go for that one.
All right. Based on the information, grant conditional final approval to the application with the staff conditions listed in the memo, and to make it clear that this is specific to Stewart Ambulance and not to any further use in the property.
I've got a general condition already pretty much
All right,
together. So
good.
I understand the intent.
Is there a second for Lynn's motion? Maureen, you have a second. Discussion.
Yeah, I just had a question. How many units are in there? How many?
For sleeping,
Yeah.
there's 2 bedrooms and they're approximately 10 by 12 maybe.
And is this like something that they just stay in for a few nights and then, or is this a permanent
We,
residence?
we operate on 12-hour shifts, and so if a person, an employee does work a 24-hour shift, then they do sleep there, yes. But it's not long-term at all.
Thank you.
Is there a number of bunks in each bedroom, or is it?
Probably one.
Each bedroom has 2, not bunks, they are side-by-side, full-size beds, yes.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
there must be like kitchen.
Well, it's not a
sorts of-
kitchen is counted with microwave and a refrigerator, but there's no stoves or cooktops or anything like that. And in all honesty, we don't encourage them to stay around the base. We would prefer that they be outside working. So there's really nothing inside there.
How
that-
many vehicles do you have there?
I believe we have 3.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Further questions? Then all in favor of granting conditional final approval pursuant to the motion as made, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 for that. Thank you very much for the
A
presentation.
pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for bringing your project into compliance once you found out that there was an issue. I encourage that for everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6 on our agenda is How Distribution LLC as the applicant and Utsi Properties MHT LLC. Review for acceptance and consideration of final approval of a site plan to construct a 340,000 square foot warehouse building and associated site improvements. The parcels located on Crow's Nest Circle in the I-1 Industrial and Aquifer Conservation Districts, Tax Map 2D, Lot 21, Case Planning Board 2022-33. Tim, is there anything that we need to know before we hear from the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. In the packet, you'll find a memo from myself dated September 30th. This goes back to the Crow's Nest Circle subdivision that was granted final approval back in 2015. You may recall at the time, there was a bidder for the New Hampshire liquor contract that was proposing to do a large warehouse on this particular property. That entity did not end up winning the bid with the state. So the property has been undeveloped since that time. This project is calling for approximately 340,000 square foot high cube warehouse. As I've noted in the memo, there are some inconsistencies and conflicts in terms of the actual total square footage. We are looking at about 300 spaces for parking, 88 loading docks, and this would potentially be separated into different tenant units. The application indicates that it's expected to be a 24-hour, 3-shift operation. However, this type of warehouse use is typically a low traffic generation, as most of the generated traffic is off-peak hours. There was a short traffic analysis provided, which has been sent over to our peer review consultant. We note that this is an appropriate type of study given the number of trips that this property would generate in this use, and that the intersection out with DW Highway in this area is a 4-lane section with plenty of capacity. We also note that the applicant is suggesting that they need to get a waiver from the building design standards. However, I note that our industrial design standards for Mast Road specifically exempts it, so there is no need for that waiver. At this stage, because peer review is probably going to be in my office tomorrow morning, because there was a after the fact drainage submittal that was submitted that required a little bit of extra time to review. We do not have the benefit of the full peer review to have before you here tonight. So our recommendation is to open the discussion with the applicant, discuss the application, and then if the applicant is comfortable starting the 65-day clock, go ahead and accept the application as complete. However, if the applicant does not want to start that clock, I'd recommend you continue both the application and the public hearing to the November 1st meeting. I will note that one thing I did review after I had finished the memo that didn't dawn on me as I was doing this is because portion of this lot actually has frontage on Mast Road in addition to Crow's Nest Circle. There's actually 2 front setbacks on this property. So the building as it's proposed right now is in the front setback of Mast Road and will either need to be redesigned or a variance obtained in order for it to be located where it's currently proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Please introduce yourself and tell us about the proposed project.
Sure. I have my name is Matt Ruthier. I'm with TF Moran. I am representing the applicant. We have a colored plan here. I don't know if this is something you'd like me to put up for you, but I think we'd like to attempt to proceed as sort of a conceptual hearing, get the board's input. Obviously, we know we need the final peer review comments and the other issues that have been brought up in the staff report to address.
I don't know if you have an easel or one of these chairs or something could hold up the color
I have
plan, but-
electronic too. I don't know if
Oh yeah, put it on the computer. Well, I'll see it. Very good.
Pretty orange.
I take it back. The setback issue is the I'm trying to remember where it is. We'll deal with it afterwards. Sorry.
It's not, but it's not Mast Road. Okay.
So again, as Mr. Thompson had briefly given the board a overview of this, we're proposing this warehouse, high cube warehouse on this existing 18-acre lot. Crow's Nest Circle was developed and I guess finalized in about 2018. And we are proposing 2 access points to this warehouse. The access point closest to Mast Road would be for truck access. And the upper access road or drive to the property would be specifically for vehicular access. As you can see, we're proposing a multitude of truck docks along the railroad bed facing the wastewater treatment plant, with some additional tractor trailer parking to the far end of the building for use by the prospective tenants. We have designed this project to utilize Pennachuck municipal water. We are proposing leach fields due to the location of the sewer being somewhere on the far side of the wastewater treatment plant and not in the vicinity of this particular parcel. We are proposing to infiltrate all stormwater and recharge the groundwater as required and in excess. We are providing more than the required parking for this particular building, and I guess the discrepancy probably in the square footage is the actual footprint is around 339, and then we're anticipating approximately about 20,000 square feet in mezzanine as a possible total build out. Therefore, that number comes out to the 359 plus or minus 1,000. As Tim had said, we've done the traffic study for this and noted no particular impact to the adjacent roadways. And we do have to obviously go before a Conservation Commission, which will not be till the 10th. So we anticipated coming back to you folks anyways, as I assume you will want that input from the board before you make your final decision. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments or concerns you folks have.
Thank you, Matthew. My first question is snow, and where would you push it or put it on the parcel, or would it be trucked off?
We anticipate pushing the snow to the far end where the truck loading area is. Obviously, that we will have to truck it off should there become excess, and there's actually, I believe, a note on the plan that specifies that.
Okay, which note is it?
Let me see if I can find it in here.
That's it. Will you be also removing the snow from the roof of the building, or is that just snow, the parking lot that you would push to the?
That would
truck
be
area?
strictly a parking lot. The roof will be designed in order to handle the snow and has internal roof drains to carry that
Okay,
runoff into the infiltration basins.
okay. Which note was it that you said? 6?
6, yep.
Snow storage provided on the site are completely utilized. Excess snow shall be transported. Okay. So all of it in the back, in the front of the property towards Mass Road, are those just detention ponds, or?
That is a infiltration basin that we're proposing to take the roof and the upper portion parking lot and the parking lot to the left.
Okay.
And then the remainder will be in the underground systems located underneath the concrete loading pads.
On the plan that you have, the colored one, are the dotted areas under the rectangles underneath the truck parking your infiltration system, or?
Yes, these are infiltration basins here, and the other items here are the proposed leach fields.
Okay. Which part of the parking lot and building flows towards those detention ponds, and which part goes into the underground?
From this section of the access drive at the bulb of the cul-de-sac, going down, and this portion drain to this infiltration basin. The front half of the roof of the building will be piped down into this surface basin. And then the back portion of the building and the remaining parking and truck loading will go to the infiltration systems that are located underground.
Okay.
Where are they on?
What's that?
Where are they located under the ground?
You can see the dashed lines.
Oh, okay. I got it. Thank you.
There's a few of them
Yep.
here, and then there's
Missed
one
it,
on the
yep.
side of the building.
Okay. The access way that's off of Crow's Nest Circle, off of the cul-de-sac, is that located over an easement, or is the property line change right there?
That is a access and slope easement that was existing during the subdivision. created
That was
during the
established
subdivision.
when the subdivision was created.
Okay, so it exists already?
Yes.
Okay. You're gonna build in phases, 2 phases?
We anticipate building in 2 phases, with the first phase being the closest section to Crow's Nest, yes.
Okay. So that would be basically what looks like the first 4 units, if they end up being separate units.
Yes, and we're still looking at possibly updating the phasing notes on how we actually go about the construction of phase 2.
Does your plan set here have a truck turning plan or traffic?
We do have a truck thing. I don't think it was included, but we have run a WB65 throughout the entire site as being the largest truck for maneuvering. The intent would be for trucks to turn around in this area and not go around the building, so that all truck traffic would remain in this area to the right and behind the building to get in and out.
Okay. And you've got the analysis that says all of that will work and it's doable?
Yes.
Okay.
We have
So-
roughly, I think, 130 feet from the back of the building to the edge of pavement, and I believe this is in excess of that due to the trailer parking.
Yeah, the proportions just look so strange when it's that
It's,
big
the
of a
scale
building.
is the scale is tough.
Gigantic building.
Speaking of which, it reminds me, going back to the information I had from when Robert and I had talked about this earlier, it's not necessarily that the building is in the setback for Crow's Nest, but it's showing a side setback instead of the front setback. So it's a verification, because it looks like it might be just outside the 50 feet away from Crow's Nest that's required. So that'll be a verification that'll need to take place between this and the next revision.
Sounds good. Something like more than 8 and less than 9 acres for the building. Pretty big space.
I believe there, on that subdivision plan, if I may ask Tim, there was, I thought, a reduction in the setback on the,
If there was part of
Approved
the
subdivision.
for the subdivision, there wouldn't be a setback variance because there was no structures proposed at the time. There would have had to have been a proposed use that would require the relief from the setback in order to have obtained the variance.
I'll have to reference back to it
Yeah.
because I was positive there was something to do with 25. I thought for sure it was a structure at the time.
Like I said,
So-
I think there's a dimension that says it's 51 feet from the corner, right
Yeah.
where you've got that corner where the angle of the building is,
Sure,
right there.
up here, yep.
So you might actually meet the requirement, but the setback is being shown as 20 when it should be 50.
So the cul-de-sac entrance or roadway is strictly for non-trailer access and exit.
That's correct. It would be for vehicles and workers only.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I assume the fire trucks would want to make sure that they could get in there as well. Barbara,
Okay, so can you clarify for me, if a tractor trailer is coming down Mass Road, how are they getting in here? And what's the path to get to the bays?
So as they come down Mass Road, they'll be taking a left into the site
Right?
and taking the first access drive.
Okay, so that's where they go and they don't
Yep.
go down to the curb.
Correct. Yep. And then they'll be doing their
Yeah,
turning
going in
maneuvers
there,
and out,
and then
yep.
when they're ready to leave, if they do need to turn around, they'll have to go to the end of the building, and if not, if they've managed to back in, they're out the same way?
Yeah, if they backed into these docks, they can easily drive out
Right.
without turning around.
Okay, and is there, at the entrance, is there enough room for 2 tractor trailers at the same time getting in through that? Entrance?
Yes. This width, I believe, is 30 feet of pavement.
So one in and one out at the same time.
Correct.
That access was designed to be wider than our typical access.
Okay, good, yeah. Got the room, might as well use it.
Yep.
Also, what did you say about you're gonna be hooking up to town sewerage?
No.
No,
Despite the fact that the sewage treatment plant
Really?
is right there, you do not
Really?
have access to sewer there.
Really?
Really?
yeah, no, actually, I was involved with this project before from previous times, and the sewer treatment plants lines that go near there
Yeah,
are
they're
high
not.
pressure lines, big main lines, and you don't just tap
They're
into
the,
them.
they're
so,
the transport lines that are under the railroad tracks, the right of way. Yep.
so yeah, it has to be a
But
septic
still,
site. Are there dumpsters on the site?
The dumpsters would be located most likely in the areas of these stairwells out the back of the building on the concrete pads. Obviously, without having tenants at this point in time, that's where we would anticipate it.
They'd be by each unit, so each unit would have their own facility for dumpster.
Typically, that would be the case, yes.
Given the introduction that we're dealing with kind of a concept here and having a discussion, I think when we would see final plans, we'd probably ask you to put some specificity on where that would be. Or at least some choices of where it would be. I know it's facing the railroad track in the back by a bunch of loading docks, and it can't possibly matter which one you put them at, but just so that they're on the plan and somebody can tell whether they're in the right place when they're built. What's the height of the building going to be?
50 feet.
Is this going to be sort of an automated robotic type warehouse, or is this a lot of manual?
There hasn't been a specified use for it at this time. Again, it's kind of based on tenant wants and
Don't
needs
have-
and
don't have
having
a
the
tenant, you can't say.
flexibility.
Okay.
Not automated.
Is there going to be any desire or need to want to have a railroad siding or a connection to the railroad that's right next to it?
No.
This is the applicant.
Hi, my name is
Sure.
Ashok Rampuria. Yeah, so no, we are not planning to have any automated robotic warehousing, and also we are not planning to use the railroad side.
Not going to use the road side. Okay. Is there a need to have 300 parking spaces on the site, or you figure that there'll be that many employees there, or that's just how much space you had to work with? Or?
So not knowing exactly who the tenant would be, I'm just erring on the side of having enough. You know, some tenant may require more parking than others. I have an existing warehouse which I just built 2 years ago in Amherst, which is similar to this, and that is roughly 242,000 square feet, and I had close to 200 parking, which is, you know, I have only 2 tenants in the building. It was planned for 5 tenants, and so one tenant tend to be using little more than the one which has the bigger space, 160,000 square feet. They are not using that much. And then, you know, over the years, the tenant may change. So I just want to make sure there is enough parking.
Okay. Thank you for that. I understand there's some retaining walls around the site, and some of them that get a little bit over 3 feet, over 4 feet. Can you point out where you're putting retaining walls and what their general heights are as you lead us around the site?
Sure, we've made some slight adjustments to them. Let's see here. The retaining wall pretty much start at this particular section. We've addressed the height issue here where the culvert came out. The wall's been pushed back. Continues around. There is I believe, a break in between here, and then it comes here as well. And then there's a section along the access drive, and then further down, pretty much along the whole thing and terminating, as you can see, right about here.
Your lot is higher or lower than the?
Due to the elevation change of the cul-de-sac and the need to get higher up for stormwater, we've had to raise the elevation up to the building.
Okay.
So we're climbing up probably about a little over 3% into the parking lot,
Okay.
which
And you-
necessitated the need again with the doors and accessibility to push the grade up.
So you mentioned a culvert under Crow's Nest Circle.
Yes, there is a flared end section here that leads to a catch basin, which discharges to the wetlands.
Okay. Is that part of your drainage plan for the property?
Excuse me?
Is that part of how you intend to drain the parking
No,
lot?
we are actually dealing with all of it on site. We have added a flared end section here to collect anything that comes off the access drive and bring it back onto the site. Again, that whole portion will come back to this.
Yeah. So if that culvert doesn't take any of your drainage, what does it do?
That was a originally designed culvert for the roadway, the existing roadway when they built it,
Okay.
because there's a high point in the road and it's in a swale. So there is a slope easement along this side of the road. I didn't think
Okay.
they anticipated the need to work with the slope, that the grade change that was there between the road and the proposed lot.
So it's just a culvert inlet that faces a 3 or 4 foot retaining wall, and
Yes,
really
the
have any
retaining
water
wall's
that
been
keeps it?
pulled back to create a pocket, and then a little steeper slope, 2 to 1, with some riprap to maintain that height that's required
Okay.
for compliance.
Has Crow's Nest Circle been accepted as a town road?
Yes.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, we actually, I know that Public Works, because of the inactivity down there, I believe there's a Jersey barrier down there currently to prevent access to, because there was some, well, for lack of a better word, mischief going on out there. So the police
Surprise,
and
surprise.
Public Works Department agreed and emailed and worked with the property owner to block the roadway for the time being.
Yeah, I remember there used to be kids that ride motorcycles around a little track there, and some people that would target shoot on that parcel. Yeah, yeah, whatever kids do. And the back part of this parcel abuts the Anheuser-Busch parcel.
That is correct, yep. The far end here, yep.
Talk too much. Any other board members have questions? Barbara, and then Nelson.
You know, on your east side, I can't tell how much pavement you have after the bays as you approach the tracks.
I believe, and I can probably pull it up here, if you give me a second. For clarity. 141 feet, and this concrete apron, I believe, is 60.
So that would leave 80 feet.
I think it's something to
The reason I bring this up is I'm not sure you guys are aware, but there is a project in works right now of putting light rail in, and those tracks are going to be used. And in fact, the plan is to double the tracks. So one of your abutters is the railroad.
yes.
So you might want to check with them to make sure you all have enough clearance and they all have enough clearance. Because last I heard, that project's still on.
They'll have to stay on their own property, railroad will.
Well, that's what it is.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they can, I'm not sure how big their easement is for the tracks.
Yeah, it's a good caution for the applicant to just to know what's going on around them.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it could impact them, but
When, if they start working on those tracks.
Right. Yeah, as you can see, the distance from the tracks is, center line of tracks is probably close to 50 to 70 feet from the actual property line, so. But I appreciate that, thank you.
Nelson, you had a question.
Yeah, I had a question about the property to the west of this one. There's another lot in there. Is that correct? Your lot line, that treed area in that picture, that lot, I don't know if it includes wetlands, but it's
Yeah, the majority of the westerly lot is wetlands. As you can see, the wetlands are highlighted, so the developable area is rather small for this
yeah.
particular lot.
Okay, but that, I just wanted to clarify, that's not your property.
No,
that's-
our
yeah,
property line runs straight across.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to clarify it. Thank you.
Other questions, Nelson?
That's all I have tonight.
Does anyone else have questions?
I just wanted to ask two questions about driving down and coming out of, is it Mast Road? It looks, if you, especially if you're having tractor trailers, it looks very, it is very narrow, and then it comes to the railroad tracks. So if they miss this entrance into Crow's Nest, like what's the plan for them to, I guess, turn around? Because there really is no way to turn around. Just to back up.
I can say that based on my experience being out there doing test bits during the day and watching tractor trailers bringing wood chips and whatnot to the wastewater treatment plant, you know, there is a ability for them to turn around down here, should that be the case. And it actually is a fairly wide section road. Obviously, it does narrow down, but from what I've seen tractor trailers, I've seen, you know, big RVs, full bus size RVs coming down, and nobody has seemed to have too much of a problem getting turned around in and out.
If I'm driving that tractor, I know where the turn is.
We hope.
I hope so.
And same with coming out. Well, I went down there tonight and I did see the dirt bike riders and everybody else down there. I mean, there was the railroad tracks and then the fence for the wastewater treatment. So I didn't see a lot of room there. But same on the way of coming out. I guess I'm picturing in my head like something like a FedEx or a UPS where there's 3 different shifts and everybody's coming out at the same time, or coming in at the same time. The traffic there.
That's not the type of warehouse use
That's not
that's
the type
proposed
of
here. No.
warehouse. No.
No, and I know that their traffic engineer is here if you have specific questions regarding that, but based on I don't know if I have it with me. I can grab it.
Thank you, Tim, but I'm Bob Duval, Chief Engineer at TF Moran, and types of warehouses are very tightly classified in the new version of ITE, and HCW warehouse itself, Land Use Code 154, is very narrowly defined. It specifically excludes a distribution center, such as a FedEx or a Amazon type, which has a much higher traffic volume. This type is specifically defined as high cube, meaning larger bulky items that come in on large trucks and are stored, and the storage in the warehouse can be a shorter or longer period, but it's typically in and out, and it's not a distribution center that, you know, stores a large amount of goods that then go out in trucks all day long. It's large trucks in and generally large trucks out.
So, okay, I think I heard it was going to be 3 shifts, looking at 3 shifts running 24 hours, right? And so are we looking at like box type of trucks or tractor trailers, or are we not sure? And so you're looking at like freight?
It's
basically?
mostly large trucks. There are some, you know, smaller trucks, and, you know, for example, Mr. Rampuria has furniture warehouses.
Okay.
And so it's, you know, a shipment of, from Ashley Furniture or whatever, brings in 100 desks or bureaus, or whatever, puts them in the warehouse, and then smaller box trucks will pick up those for individual
Okay.
deliveries.
So it's not looking like something like where all of a sudden all these box trucks are leaving at the same time every day. It's going to be kind of 24 hours a day.
The traffic study is indicating that the AM peak hour, you're going to get a total of 29 trips. The weekday PM peak hour, 36 trips. Saturday, 43. For a weekday total of 504 and a weekend total of 338, which in this type of size of building and in this location is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I think the previous design was actually a much more intense traffic, and when they were considering it for a liquor warehouse. But as you go up Mast Road to DW Highway, you turn right and you're almost immediately at Industrial Drive to get onto the turnpike, and the very, very little local traffic would be generated from this site. That was sort of one of the interesting features of it from way back when. Similar to the one on Robert Milligan. It's just really located very
Except
close to
Robert
it.
Milligan is more of a distribution style, which
Yeah.
will have a higher volume of trips than this would.
I was just thinking about the location of the site.
But in
as
terms
the-
of location
close
of the
to
site and where the trips are going to go, yeah, it's 95% to the turnpike.
Yep. If not more. Other comments or questions? So what do we need to do, Matthew, for you to, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course.
One more. So when I'm looking at driving into the parking lot where the tractor trailers will be coming, where it says relocated, clasping millweed there, right? That's where you're looking at the two the tractor trailers entering and exiting?
Yeah.
And then is that parking there or no?
There is a row of parking here and here. Again, with the sparsity of the truck traffic and the variety of parking spaces we have, we don't anticipate it being conflicting uses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think the main question for the applicant at this point is whether or not they want to start the 65-day clock or if they're comfortable continuing the acceptance and hearing.
Yeah, what's your pleasure? Do you want us to vote on acceptance and then that starts a 65-day clock where you got to get all your stuff in, or ask for extensions if you need them? But
Yeah, we would like to have you folks vote on accepting the application so we can keep this ball rolling.
okay. I think that there were the truck turning plan and some of those things that we asked for that would follow up into another one, and I don't think that those are necessarily the reasons to find the application is not complete, even though those are some additional materials that we would expect to see coming along.
All
later.
the required elements for submission have been provided, so staff would recommend jurisdiction is available and should be accepted as complete.
What's the will of the board? Nelson,
So moved, Mr. Chairman. I would move to accept the plan for consideration.
is there a second? Second by Neil. Gotta be
You
fast.
made it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 600 to find the application complete. So the rest of the staff's recommendation is that we hold off on a public hearing and further consideration of the application until we have peer review and some other information. Does that suit your needs? Is there-
That is fine, yep.
Is there any specific design question you wanted to hear our viewpoints on or concerns about while we're here?
I guess we would just ask for the board's input, I guess, on the waivers that we've requested and whether there's any, concerns with those that have been asked.
Go through your waivers for me.
Sure. The first one we'd asked for was the building design, but I believe that one's out at this point, so that's not necessary. We were looking for a waiver from section 3.11.1.1 interior parking landscape percentages. We were looking for a reduction in that. And I believe
The other was the tree setback from,
correct, and then there was a setback, there's a standard of 5 feet from the curb. Obviously, we have some pinch points here on the front portion of the property, but the trees will be placed behind a guardrail and between the walls, so the 5 foot that's typically required is actually, this is a little bit better as far as protecting the trees, just because there's a guardrail in it.
assuming that there's no significant concerns that come up through peer review. Staff is comfortable with those, given the location where this property is located. It's not a high visibility site, so.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's not a high visibility site. Plus, you provide us some elevations, and it's as a warehouse goes, a handsome looking building. And you have done something with what you can with landscaping here and there.
The building's location is the reason why the design standards don't apply. It's because you can't see it from DW.
Yeah. So does any member of the board have any challenges or problems waiving the landscape standards, interior parking landscape standards, or the specific thing of the trees?
Comment.
Barbara? Yes,
Yeah,
please.
To say that it's not visible or there aren't enough neighbors around, we don't know what this area is going to look like in 25 years from now. So I would prefer that they consider what is necessary from a landscaping perspective. We may not want all the flowers and
From-
shrubs we normally do, but
From the perspective of the person that wrote the requirements,
yeah.
they're meeting the design intent given where the location of the
Okay.
property is and
Okay.
what they have.
Then why are
available
they
for
asking
space.
for a waiver?
Because in this particular location with the tightness of the grades and everything that are, and the size of the building,
Right.
you just can't make
Can't
it
put
work
'em in there.
without sacrificing a certain number of parking spaces and
Okay. Well, that makes more sense than saying that it's just not visible from DW. Because,
that's the primary reason though.
you know, I mean, we have apartment buildings in places we never thought we'd have apartment buildings, so.
Sure. Um, most of the sites around this are relatively identified in terms of what's going on with them, with the DCU up by the street and the wastewater treatment plant obviously next door, Budweiser on one side, and
Given
this
the
wetland-
environmental challenges of the other
parcel.
lots on Mast Road, the lot just to the west of this is probably the only one that's ever gonna get developed.
Um,
And if I could just add to that, even if it were developed in the buildable area, that the wetland goes beyond that green shading. It really goes all the way,
Yeah.
you know, hundreds of feet beyond. So those trees will never be touched. And that screening will always be there.
Never say never.
Well, the other part of that stuff is as to a landscaping plan and shrubberies and all of that, it's a 50-foot tall building. You're just not going to hide that behind some landscaping. So it's a big boy, which is, you know, what our industrial zone is for. It's
That's a good
actually,
location for it.
yeah, it's actually significantly lower than.
From an
what
economic
the
development
living
perspective, it's a project I'm very excited to have come to town.
conditions. Okay. Anything else that you want us to weigh in on that you feel like you need to have some feedback on?
I don't think there's anything else at this point.
Yep. So we've offered a consensus on those waivers requests, not in a specific vote. So we got to make sure we actually vote on those next time with, you know, the more full presentation of what it is that you're proposing and what you're asking for an exemption from. But I don't see any issues with proceeding on that basis. When do you want to come back?
November 1st, the staff recommendation.
Does that work for you guys?
Yep.
Does that give you enough time to prepare the things that you need to prepare?
I can't do 2 weeks because the agenda is already posted for that meeting. I already have
It
the.
has to be
It has to be,
November
yeah.
Okay.
I can't add it to that. We've already got it set and posted with, I think I have, even if I wanted to, it would be 1 o'clock in the morning if I added something else to it because I have a large agenda that night.
And I think we've got a submission deadline for that one. It's also
Submission deadline's
today.
already passed. That was last week, actually.
So November 1st is the quickest we can get to you. If there's nothing else you need from us, then a board member could make a motion to continue the matter to November 1st with no further notice to
Is
abutters.
there a resubmission deadline for that?
Generally speaking, we try to get our memos out the Friday before the meeting, so I would need, if you can do 2 weeks prior to the meeting, that would be great.
Would that be next week then? Submit next week?
No, I don't think
it's November 1st.
2 weeks out.
2 weeks, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tonight. Okay. Board members, is anybody willing to make a motion to continue to November 1st with no further notice to abutters?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Neil. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank
Any
you very
abstaining?
much. Your comments have been helpful and we look forward to coming back.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
putting the color presentation together. That actually really helps give us a visual of what you're proposing. And I know you didn't give us these screens, but it is great to have it right in front of us like this. So
Got enough of these.
yeah,
It's so much easier than looking at the tab.
yeah, we're trying to
Yep.
bend around to look at that. Okay, item
Mr. Chairman,
second number 5 on our agenda.
I just have one request of the staff. If we could ask for a copy of the traffic study that was submitted, I would just like to have a copy for the next review.
Okay,
Okay,
Tim, can you
Tim,
include
any
that in the
problem,
package for
Tim?
next meeting?
Because it's a short analysis, I can. Otherwise, I would have said electronic, but it's only a few pages, so we'll add it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So the second number 5 on our agenda is discussion and possible action regarding other items of concern.
I have a few things.
What do you got?
I don't know how many of you are avid watchers of the legislature, but they had some fun this past session. And there are some new laws that have taken effect that have impacts on both the planning board and zoning board. The big one, which I talked about earlier, is that there is now a requirement that all local land use boards issue written findings as part of your decisions. So moving forward, staff and I will try to tailor our recommendation memos to phrase such that you'll have a proposed set of findings. It's unusual. It used to be you only had to do findings if there was a denial, but this new law requires it for approvals as well, which gets a little complex with planning boards because you really don't do a finding. If you don't meet the requirements, you either have a waiver or you don't get approved. So it's going to take a little bit of creativity to make those work, but we will try to have that moving forward. The other minor change is to the 65-day clock. There is now some changes to what happens if that 65 days is reached. If the planning board doesn't act in the 65-day, then the governing body has to approve the application. Then the governing body is required to approve the application. If the governing body doesn't do that, then it's an expedited appeal to Superior Court. There used to be an ability for the town council, in our case, to do some changes and get a 90-day extension, but that has been eliminated in this new state law. So most of the times it doesn't become an issue here because you get voluntary extensions to that clock by the applicant, but it is a new law that I thought everybody should be aware of. The other two are regulatory. I'll skip the one that's going to have the bigger impact and go to if we have any primarily religious uses, we no longer can require site plan on those. The legislature has basically exempted religious uses from land use regulations with the exception of, let's see. The only thing that's permitted in site plan review will be heights, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, and building coverage. We will not be allowed to do anything regarding lighting, signs, noise, on or on-site drainage, erosion, sediment control, layout of streets, sidewalk utilities, installation, open space, pervious, impervious, landscaping, parking, access management, etc. The legislature, in their wisdom, deferred to religious liberty way too much. And we now have essentially a free-for-all if you're a religious use in this state.
So if as this,
Yeah.
so anything dealing with the drainage,
For
etc.
a church or anything that's primarily determined to be a religious use, we can't require
You
anything.
can't require it, but so how does that work with the MS4 and storm drainage?
That's a great question that nobody in the legislature thought of, I don't think.
Well, it's a good thing I'm running.
It's a terrible, terrible, ridiculous law that I could not be more opposed to. But somehow it got through in that big omnibus bill, which is where all of this comes from. The other item that will have an impact if we do nothing, there is now until July 1st of 2023, any incentive that we currently offer for elderly or age-restricted housing are going to be automatically applicable to workforce housing come July 1 of next year. So if we make no changes, basically our elderly requirements then also apply to workforce housing. So if you don't like what we have for bonuses and density for elderly, and you don't want it to apply to workforce, then there needs to be some work on our ordinance language.
We should probably have some kind of a meeting where we review those things and
Yeah.
understand what it is that we might be impacted with.
Tim, one question.
Yeah.
Do they define what they mean by religious use?
Of course not.
No, I mean, that's a fuzzy area.
The actual language of the statute is no zoning ordinance or site plan review regulation shall be prohibit, regulate, or restrict the use of land or structures primarily used for religious purposes.
Yeah.
That could be a park.
Well, yeah, and what kind of religion, there's all
The,
kinds of
the,
religions.
the
schools are already
guidance, the
exempt,
guidance
but-
we have, I'm reading from the,
Okay, no, I was,
business, yeah, it's, the guidance we
not
have right
blaming
now
you.
is that this basically overrides any municipal limitations, but it's silent on state and federal. So, please, those who are in the legislature, fix this in the next session.
I don't know the backstory to what small town got sideways with a church's approval, but that's how these things are born. As
yeah.
some small town with a connected
And
legislator.
let's be honest, we went through this when I first started here back in 2011 with the Jehovah's, where the zoning board made a terrible decision denying their, I think it was a special exception, based on traffic. How many people actually see any traffic generated by that since it's been established out of there in Wire Road? Everybody was out there concerned about the neighborhood being overrun with traffic, and there's, what, 5 or 6 cars there on the weekend?
That actually, that review of that Kingdom Hall, I think is what they call their churches, was it brought out the worst in a lot
It
of
did.
people.
Yes,
Yeah,
it did.
so some of the things that were said or implied about them were just not only not true, but they're just ugly.
It was, let's face it, there were two different sections to that lawsuit. One was the land use part of it. The other was the religious the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, basically a religious discrimination lawsuit that could have left us vulnerable for millions in damages.
Yep. Now the planning board wasn't involved.
Planning
in the
board
things
was
that got
no
sued.
problem through that process. The planning board acted appropriately and fairly and did the right thing through the site plan process.
Oh, but
Unfortunately,
we still had neighbors coming out saying all kinds of crazy things, and just
Lights in my bedroom.
and even the settlement that we came up with the attorneys that eventually had to go back to the zoning board still was a 3-2 vote when we finally got back to the zoning board.
people talking about selling their house because of the approval of the thing, and that the value of their home, obviously everybody always throws out my home value will be hurt by it, but actually we're trying to argue that being nearby a church with a playground for kids outside was going to damage the value of their home. And it's just a bizarre thing to say, regardless of what religion it is. But anyway, I'm glad that that piece of it is over. But
But anyway, now we have the really bad overreaction that we're now having to deal with.
well, church proposals in town are fairly sparse and rare, so it probably won't come up a lot. But I don't know if there will be applicants who try to bootstrap their restaurant into a religious purpose, or whatever it is that they got that they didn't like. the approval
This
of.
is where it gets complicated because I know there was a Concord case several years ago where there was a determination made that ended up at the Board of Land and Tax Appeals as to what percentage of the use of the property was actually religious and what was just being used as residential land that they were renting off to a bunch of people that went to the church. And it got ugly.
Yep. There was a significant court case. I think it might have gone to the Supreme Court from here in Merrimack with the church that's down by Home Depot related to their taxation of their parking lot. And were they using their parking lot for religious purposes when they were renting out spaces to, I don't know who else, but it might have been Home Depot. But anyway.
That's the quick update. If anybody's interested, I can send you more information on this, but I do think it will make sense that sometime in the coming months, we take a look at the elderly housing requirements and see what ramifications that will have come next July for workforce housing. Not that I am opposed to those incentives being applied to workforce housing, because anything we can do to encourage workforce housing I'm totally okay with. As long as it's in the appropriate location and it's designed properly, we need it.
Yep. There's definitely some need for the legislature to engage with some towns that want to restrict both elderly and workforce housing to try to push down those barriers that the towns are putting up to them. I don't know exactly whether they picked the right hammer to do it with, but there's a lot of towns that just get crazy decisions about it based on, it might add a couple of kids to the school or something like that. I had one town that decided that a green space, like a 10-foot green space along the roadway, would fundamentally alter the character of the neighborhood. How? On what earth?
Over the course of my 25+ years in this profession, I've heard a lot of things, and that's not surprising.
Anything else, Tim, under discussion items?
Nothing under this item, though. Thank you.
Do board members have any discussion items or items of concern?
No, I don't.
I don't have any either off the top of my head.
I will just mention, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a fairly robust agenda in 2 weeks. We have 2 CIP public hearings for the town and 4 MVD, and I believe we have either 5 or 6 new applications as well.
I think I'm gonna be out of town.
Most of the departments have gotten used to the idea that the relatively routine life cycle type projects can be a brief presentation for us. We don't need to hear the whole.
I do not anticipate Paul will be over long.
Good. Okay,
Ron,
board
I don't
members.
know about.
The approval of the minutes of September 6th, 2022. What say you?
Move as distributed.
I have some fixes. Neil isn't on there.
Well, hang on a second. Well, first let's get the motion, then the second, then we get to the edits. There's a motion. Who wants to second? Barbara seconds that Neil has an edit. He'd like to be listed as having attended.
I would like to be listed as.
All right, so there's one edit. Anybody else?
My last name, EY.
I have some comments.
Your name should be EY or isn't EY?
It should be EY.
It is under members
It isn't
present.
throughout the notes. Yeah,
Oh,
it's easy. People do it all the time. So,
hunt and replace. Okay, who else had a? Nelson?
I just had a couple of things on page 2, line, let me see here. Okay, yeah. So, there's a second. Closer.
Line.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't have them marked very well here.
No problem. Take your
Never
time.
mind.
Okay. This is not on page 2.
Well, I see one on page 2 now that you pointed out. On line 42, statute should be statute.
Yes. I just didn't circle it. That's,
That's a Scrivener's error.
Yeah.
yeah. And then-
Medication and mediation get me that every single day as a lawyer. I use those words every single day, medication and mediation as a healthcare lawyer. And the C is the only difference.
Well, sometimes they're interchangeable.
Yeah. That's it. Nelson, where else did you want us to look?
See,
Nelson, you normally do better than this.
I know. I'm
Take your
sorry.
time.
I'm sorry.
Pen out also.
What?
Red pen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mark them well enough to find them quickly. Go ahead with your work. They were,
Never mind.
they were,
Scrivener's errors.
yes, thank you.
Okay, if there aren't any other suggested changes, then all in favor of approving the minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to approve the minutes. That brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn? I don't know. It depends on who
I
makes the
move we
motion.
adjourn.
Is there a second?
Okay.
All in favor,
tried.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? 6-0-0 to adjourn. Thank you all very much. Don't forget to turn your microphones off.